Okay, hello everyone. Thanks Michaela and Jeremy and Matt and Darren. And thanks for everyone that's on Zoom. It is a profound honor to be speaking again here at the Russell Museum. I spoke here about 2 years ago. And the whole group here at the University of Science and Philosophy are doing profoundly important work in not only preserving but reawakening the world to the work of Leo and Walter Russell. I don't think a lot of people have heard of them, but I think they're two of the most remarkable people in history. And I hope everyone someday gets a chance to come to the museum here. They've done a remarkable job putting together this museum, and they have all the Russell's work here. And I actually got a tour yesterday, and it is remarkable what Walter Russell and Leo did. Walter composed music, he wrote books, he did paintings, he did sculpture, he was a national figure skating champion, he designed buildings. And by the way, he came up with a new concept of the universe, of which Nikola Tesla said that he had to put it away for 1,000 years because it was too far ahead of its time. And so just remarkable what they've done. And I think their work and what is so important for the world at this critical time in history. Now, these are challenging times for the US and the world. And so today I'm going to talk about some very hopeful things. In the late 1960s, the Indian sage Gopi Krishna, who died at the age of 81 in 1984, advanced a new groundbreaking theory of human evolution. It posits that human evolution is planned, that the human brain is evolving, and that individuals and the whole human race are moving to a more expanded and profound state of consciousness, and that this is coming about through the actions of a biological mechanism and intelligent energy in the body, which was called Kundalini. Now, the concept of Kundalini has been known for a long time. It has an ancient lineage. It goes back to India and BC times. But what Gopi Krishna has done, he's put the concept into the language of science, and he's expanded it. And by saying that it's actually the evolutionary energy in humankind is what's propelling us to this new state of consciousness, and that's predetermined that we're going to get there. And also that it involves a biological process, which is what really interested me, because I thought to myself, well, one day this can probably be proven by physical science. So, and the zenith of this expanded state of consciousness was termed cosmic consciousness by Dr. Richard Maurice Buck in his 1901 landmark book, Cosmic Consciousness, A Study in the Evolution of the Human Mind. And this state of mind has been called by various names throughout history, and I'm sure some people have heard of these names, but they include the fountain of youth, the Holy Grail, enlightenment, samadhi, nirvana, paradise, and also cosmic consciousness. So I'm going to use the term cosmic consciousness today. And I believe we all have the light of a stupendous intelligence within us, and divine-like GPS system to guide us on our journey, and we have the potential to reach a higher state of consciousness where eternal life swims into view and a blissful, bright, and calm splendor graces our being, also to achieve what Walter Russell termed the life triumphant. And we're all going to get there someday. That's one of the things I'm going to talk about today, because a lot of people may say, well, I'm not going to get there in this lifetime, and that's probably true for most of us, but we will get there one day, because we will find out that we are eternal beings. So Walter Russell will be remembered a long time for many things, including his conception of a natural science. He said the few simple workable processes of creation are observable processes of nature. He said nature is based upon the law of love, which is balance giving for re-giving. All that man ever has is that which he has given. That is nature's only law, and it must become man's only law. And so what he was saying is that, throughout history, we've been too much of takers and not enough of givers. We have to be sivers, or we have to serve, and we have to be givers. And the other thing Walter Russell did is he put the creator back into creation and science. And so both the Russells, and because Leo and Walter and Gopi Krishna believed that genius and the cosmic conscious mind were possible for human beings. And all three experienced some degree of a cosmic conscious mind. Walter Russell said, one day everyone on earth will achieve cosmic consciousness. And Gopi Krishna said the earth is to become an abode of a graceful, highly intelligent, cosmic conscious race. They both also believed the human race was in dire straits, and this was in the 60s for Walter Russell, late 50s, and Gopi Krishna. In the early 1980s, they thought the race was heading in the wrong direction and needed to ascend to a higher state of mind to access a higher source of knowledge to save civilization. I still think that is very true today, even more so. Our future remains very uncertain as we face many massive problems. There's a lot of division, partisanship, and polarization now in the United States and in the world. We can't seem to find a way to work together to solve our problems and achieve a bright future together. So today I'm going to share why I believe the concepts of Kundalini, cosmic conscious mind, the law of love, and the life triumphant offer such hope to the world at this uncertain time. Gopi Krishna said, earth-wide dissemination of knowledge of the glory dwelling in every human being is the only way to bring about the unification of all humankind. It will make known the common goal prescribed by nature for the life of man. The solemn task in front of us is to provide empirical evidence for the basic reality of cosmic consciousness. Now, again, he died in 1984. He called for experiments on the brain. They never happened, and we're still hopeful that that can be done. And then in speaking of the possibilities of achieving a higher state of consciousness and the positive impact that that would have on our youth, Gopi Krishna wrote, the children on whom our future depends will be alive to this truth from an early age. The result can be electrifying. There's no influence and method of upbringing that can act so well in inculcating the desire for an ideal life in the plastic minds of children as the idea of a romantic adventure needing courage, devotion, honesty, truth, love, compassion, patience, and perseverance, of which the object is entry into a golden world of eternal life. So I think our youth right now oftentimes are expending their energy in maybe not the most productive ways. There's a lot of addiction, there's a lot of drugs and all that sort of thing. And I think once people understand that this is a real possibility for the human race, it will electrify all people, but especially our young people. So that's why I think it's so important to run experiments and try to prove that this is true. Mythologist Joseph Campbell wrote, the privilege of a lifetime is being who you are. So today, I'm going to share who I found myself to be, and it's a very unexpected life that I've ended up living, and the glorious inner world that I've been unexpectedly landed in. So I want to begin by taking a look at the brief history of the universe, the earth, and humankind, and how we've gotten to where we are today. Now, scientists believe the universe was formed 13.8 billion years ago when supposedly a Big Bang occurred. And from a size less than an electron, which is the smallest thing that you can ever imagine, and in a fraction of a second, the universe grew to almost its present size. And so what I'm going to ask everybody to do on Zoom there and here too, close your eyes and imagine the universe. Okay, well, you just created the universe with your mind in a fraction of a second. The universe is a creation of your mind. The Earth was estimated to form about 4.5 billion years ago. A single life form or single cell life form was found in the fossil record about 1 billion years ago. Walter and Leo Russell would say that this single cell had in it the desire to one day grow into a human being, just like an acorn has a desire to and will grow into a large oak tree. There was a film that I used to watch all the time when I lived in the Washington, D.C. area. I would go to the National Museum of Natural History, and the film was on the evolutionary history of mammals. And it stated that we humans evolved from one of the first mammals, not a chimpanzee, as most people think, but rather a 4-inch mammal named Morgie, which was short for Morganucodon. And Morgie looked like a cross between a rat and a prairie dog. And then the film described how mammals arrived on the earth over 200 million years ago, almost the same time as the dinosaurs. And then for the next 134 million years, some of the dinosaurs grew larger and scarier, while Morgie remained small. That's because she had to remain underground to stay safe from the more powerful dinosaurs and wasn't able to come to the surface to grow and flourish. The film then explained that dinosaurs had a bad day 66 million years ago when most scientists believe a large asteroid hit the Earth, And then the resulting dust and smoke that enveloped the planet created wild climate fluctuations. And it's estimated that 70% of the animal species were wiped out, including the dinosaurs. However, Morgie, because she was small, warm-blooded, and lived underground, was able to ride out the climate change and survive. And so then with the disappearance of the dinosaur, Morgie was then free to come to the surface and thrive. The evolutionary progress of mammals accelerated greatly from that time forward, and over the next 66 million years, they evolved into larger, more diverse and complex species on land and sea, and eventually into us human beings. And the film states that if you condense the whole 200 million year history of mammals down to 60 minutes, that human beings have only arrived in the last second of this hour and therefore have truly just arrived on the earth. So we're just beginning our evolutionary career. We've got a long way to go, and it was approximately 100,000 years ago that our Homo sapiens ancestors were present in much the same physical form as we are today. So it took patient nature of only about 1 billion years for this initial single cell to develop into our human ancestors. Now, the human intellect, which allows us to reason and think, developed in humankind about 20,000 years ago, and it became more fully formed about 10,000 years ago, leading to the rise of civilization. When the intellect formed, for the first time, we had a taste of free will, and we could impact our future growth by the way we think, behave, and live. So we were no longer captive of our instinct only. Now, today we have developed into intellectual and cultured people, although that might be argued, and have built a great civilization on Earth. Our highly evolved intellect gives us access to areas of creation that our instinct-bound ancestors couldn't access. And Mike Bradford wrote about this in his book, Consciousness, the New Paradigm. He said things like art, music, language, poetry, mathematics, and countless discoveries of science, these are things our dogs and animals, and when we were animals too, that weren't able to do. So, and do you think that when we were prehistoric men and women, or maybe even cave people, we thought that one day we would have built a civilization like this and be landing on the moon in a spacecraft on Mars? Probably not. So today, when a sperm cell fertilizes an ovum, a new human baby takes only 9 months to come into existence. Now compare that with the 1 billion years it took patient nature, again, to form a human being from the initial single cell. So now that's evolutionary progress at a rapid pace. But today, with our acceleration in technological and scientific growth, the world and its events are changing at breakneck speeds. We're facing many great challenges and much uncertainty. It seems that changes in the past that might have taken a century to happen are now happening in years. So a lot of people are feeling very much like we're about to go off the cliff and head in the wrong direction, while other people think, we're having some problems, but we have a very bright future. And I'm in that camp of a bright future, but we do have big problems. I think civilization, particularly Western civilization, is running up against the limits of its rapid scientific, technological, and material progress. You have to ask yourself, why are we having all these problems given how prosperous we are, relatively speaking, compared to our ancestors? If wealth were the answer to peace on earth and happiness, you would think we'd have all of that right now, but it seems to be getting less of that. So Gopi Krishna said, science and technology came, yes, to speed up the material progress of the race, and it's done a lot of great things, medical advances, the way we live today with the technology, communications, all of those things. But Gopi Krishna said its main purpose is to speed up the spiritual evolution of the race. I don't know if many people really believe that or know that, and what he said at the time is the material world is a means to an end, not an end in itself. He said we weren't brought here to overly gorge ourselves on material comforts, wealth, leisure, and entertainment, which in small amounts are very good for us. But if we go to the excess, they can lock us in sensual prisons and make us not aware of the glorious splendor that's inside of us or this new consciousness that awaits us. So he said that it was imperative that we understand the true next goal of evolution. He said, nature is showing us that the cosmic conscious sense is developing in the human race and will give us access to areas of creation beyond the human intellect. It'll be a super science and it will bring us to a glorious future. But for the most part, we're unaware of this and we're blocking its unfoldment with the way we are living our lives. So the Kundalini energy is essentially a booster rocket to speed up our evolution to this next glorious destination. And so we need to understand how we were meant to live, think, and behave, and what type of environment we're meant to live in to achieve higher states of consciousness in a healthy and safe way. And then this will allow human beings, civilization, and life to once again experience another rapid advance in healthy evolution, just like the mammals did when the dinosaurs disappeared from the earth. So I'm kind of saying that the unbalanced human intellect and excess material growth and our extroverted way of living, I think, is blocking further progress of the race at this time. And in some extent, they are the current dinosaurs. And again, the intellect is doing wonderful things too, but I think this higher sense is trying to come in and we got a different goal. We haven't seen it yet. So to me, we've become smart, rich, and powerful, but we need more humility, wisdom, and balance. And we need a spiritual revolution to counterbalance the excess material focus. And I think the concept of Kundalini and Walter Russell's new science can do that. Higher states of consciousness are a huge carrot dangled out in front of the human race today in a positive asteroid event for humanity to take it in a new direction. And just like with the intellect, we built a civilization. I think achieving these higher states of consciousness will allow us to create a new, more magnificent Earth for all of us. So it took 1 billion years to go from one cell to the development of our human ancestor, and now it takes 9 months to birth a human baby. I think it's going to be soon possible to birth a new man or woman. I'm not saying with a cosmic conscious mind, but with an expanded consciousness in one lifetime. And I think that's really great news. And so just as the prehistoric human couldn't envision what we are today, I don't think we can envision the glorious future that awaits us as we develop higher states of consciousness. Gopi Krishna said, the normal human mind is a prison for the soul, and nature has already provided the key, which is Kundalini, the process of Kundalini, to open it, to allow individuals to soar to freedom in regions of unspeakable glory and joy. And so that's what I'm going to talk about as we go on, this higher states of consciousness and the cosmic conscious mind. Next, what I want to do is let's take a look at the Earth, which is our home. Neil Armstrong was the first astronaut to walk on the moon on Apollo 11 in 1969. And he likened the Earth to a spacecraft hurtling through the universe at tremendous speed. He said the only difference is we humans are on the outside of the spacecraft instead of the inside. He said here on Earth, it's really hard to get a proper perspective of the size of the Earth and its relation to the universe. It's like being in the middle of a crowd or a forest. It's very hard to see much. He said when you were in space, as they were going up to the moon in Apollo 11, he said as they got closer to the moon, he said you couldn't even see the atmosphere that protects the Earth. And then he said the Earth was so small, and he said it was just so apparent to him that we've got to learn to take care of our spacecraft Earth, each other, and the Earth's resources. So what I'm going to try to do today is take you to a vantage point above the Earth and give you a view of it as seen through our physical senses and intellect. And I'm going to talk about what I believe is the true destiny of the Earth and its people and how we can work together to start us down the path of a stunningly glorious future. So let's take a look next at how spacecraft Earth is moving through the universe. I found all of this mind-boggling. I didn't know any of this. The Earth is spinning like a top on its axis with a little wobble at 1,000 miles per hour. That's a quarter mile per second. And this rotation gives us our seasons and our days and night. Now the Earth in turn is revolving around the sun at approximately 66,000 miles per hour, 18.5 miles per second. And the Earth travels roughly 580 million miles, always arriving at almost the exact second. Now our solar system, with the sun at the center, is traveling around the center of our galaxy, which is the Milky Way galaxy, at a comfortable cruising speed of 500,000 miles per hour, or 139 miles per second. So like when I get done here, that would be like me jumping in my car in Waynesboro, Virginia, and driving to Washington, D.C. and arriving in 1 second. And that would be nice. But in even traveling at 500,000 miles per hour, it still takes 225 to 250 million years to make one trip around the Milky Way galaxy, for our solar system to make one trip around the Milky Way galaxy. So, and it doesn't end there, because our Milky Way galaxy, along with a cluster of other galaxies, is moving toward the Virgo, which is my sign, and Leo, which is my grandfather's name, constellations at a breathtaking 1.3 million miles per hour, which is 0.2% of the speed of light, or the speed of God's thinking, as Walter Russell would say, or 361 miles per second. I just found all that mind-boggling, and it's mind-boggling to take in, but we don't feel any of this like we don't feel the speed of a plane as we eat and drink and sleep at 600 miles per hour in this airplane capsule until it slams on its brakes on the runway. So no wonder we're all a little crazed these days, given how fast things are changing here on Earth and how fast the Earth is moving through the universe. And you have to ask yourself, what keeps this all in such a precise working order? So it doesn't end there. Let's take a look at the size of the universe. The estimated diameter of the universe is now 93 billion to 156 billion light years. Now compare that with the distance from the Earth to the nearest star other than the sun, which is the Alpha Centauri system, which is approximately 4.3 light years away, which is light traveling at 186,000 miles per second for 4.3 years. That's roughly 25.6 trillion miles. It would take the Apollo 11 spacecraft that carried the astronauts to the moon in 1969, approximately 43,000 years at its peak speed to get to the nearest star. Now compare 4.3 light years with a universe whose diameter is 156 billion light years. And so it's impossible even for us to imagine a size of the universe. Next, I just want to give you some examples of the unimaginable creative power behind the universe. First, our galaxy, the Milky Way, is estimated to have 100 to 200 billion stars in it. Just one galaxy. Scientists now estimate that there are 2 trillion galaxies in the universe. So do that math. One scientist said that the number of stars in the universe is estimated to be at least 10 times, and more likely 100 times, the number of grains of sand on all the beaches and deserts on the Earth. That's hard to take in, but that's mind-boggling to me. Another example Gopi Krishna gave, he said, if you bring a softball-sized volume of material from the center of the sun to within 100 miles of the Earth, the rocks on Earth will melt and life as we know it will not survive. So I think, to me, we can probably agree that the power that has created the universe and keeps it running so smoothly is beyond the understanding of our human intellect and ego. It's like an ant trying to understand the workings of the universe, or a fish trying to gauge the size of the ocean. It's not possible in our intellect to really understand, I think, I just read about all those things. Next, I want to go from the vast universe in a macro view to the micro and look quickly at the human body, in particular the brain, which gives us what we see and think of the universe. So we have a 3-pound lump of clay called the brain in our head, which acts like a computer and controls many of the body's activities. It has an estimated 86 billion to 100 billion neurons, or brain cells. Each one of the neurons is like a mini computer. And each neuron has 50 dendrites which extend out from the body of the cell and connect. And each dendrite connects to hundreds of synapses, which link to other neurons. One scientist estimated there are 1,000 trillion connections, and all this works flawlessly together. Think about that, how mind-boggling that is, that little 3-pound lump of clay with those trillions of connections. And Gopi Krishna said the brain is the most elaborate communication system, has the largest number of irrigation channels, is the most complex transport arrangement system and the most complete medical or chemical laboratory on Earth. Now let's look at the human body. There are an estimated 30 trillion cells in our body and 200 different types of cells. Mike Bradford mentions in his book, Consciousness, the New Paradigm, how in each minute of every hour and every day, the body is doing a million different things to keep us alive. And I just want to give some examples of that. In every minute, the heart pumps 5 liters of blood through 60,000 miles of the circulatory system, which consists of blood vessels and capillaries. There are 40 billion capillaries, each 1/3 the size of a human hair. Every minute in the bone marrow, 150 million new red cells are birthed. Our stomachs are 250 square meters and they digest our food. There's an estimated, the liver is estimated to perform over 500 functions. Michael Bradford said that what is really impressive is not just that our body does all these things all the time, but it does also respond instantly to any change in our environment. So what's doing that? It's not the DNA. So no matter where you go or what you do, every minute of your life depends on your body doing countless small miracles to keep us alive. I wonder how many of us are aware of that. But the power and wonder of the brain doesn't end there. Gopi Krishna said the brain is where nature has concentrated its ingenuity. He said the brain already has embedded in it the scroll of humankind's future destiny, as also the key to its rise to another dimension of consciousness, where for the first time light begins to dawn on our own mystery. He always said that we have to transcend our intellect and bring in a new faculty of the mind to really understand why we're here and to get an understanding of the intelligence behind the universe. He said the human brain needs a rare organic change in it to bring the intangible plane of soul or consciousness within its widened range. And again, he was talking about the mechanism of Kundalini and the cosmic conscious mind. He said a real revolution will start when it is conclusively proved after experiment that a big bang can occur in the brain itself. It first occurred at the birth of reason and our intellect and can occur again on the arousal of Kundalini in the cosmic conscious sense. In the latter case, cosmic consciousness, it says it results in a state of consciousness in which the plurality created by the intellect is nullified. So we're beginning to see the unity of creation. And he said it's this explosion that will rumble down the corridors of science for ages to come. And I believe this is the mind universe that Walter Russell talked about in his Science. And it's also the unity of creation that mystics, yogis, and spiritual luminaries like Christ and Buddha saw. And I think they were finished products of this Kundalini process. And finally, Gopi Krishna said that inside the brain of every human being, the whole universe is contained in but one particle of a divine substance smaller than a grain of salt, smaller than even the smallest fragment that we can see. And he said it's not part of the brain material. I hope I'm not going too fast for everybody. So what am I seeing and knowing from this little 3-pound lump of clay that I have in my head? Well, I live in the city of Santa Barbara currently, in Santa Barbara County, in the state of California, in the United States of America and North America, on the Earth, in a solar system, in our Milky Way galaxy, in a universe. I'm hopefully going to live for about 80 to 90 years if I'm lucky and make it through this talk. Had a lot of stress lately, but then I will die and my body will be returned to the clay of the earth. And my physical senses and intellect tell me that I exist in a living and dying universe. Everything dies: planets, stars, humans, the universe, and even worms, eventually. The size, speed, and power of the universe make me understand how small and inconsequential I am. We are essentially a speck of dust on a clump of sod hurtling through the universe at terrifying speeds, not knowing where we are headed in a universe so vast, propelled by a power so great that we can't even conceive of it. And yet all of this is a projected image and knowledge provided from a 3-pound lump of unimaginable intelligent clay that exists in our head. So the earth, and therefore a human being's position on it, has gone from being seen as the center of the universe between Galileo's and Copernicus's time in the 16th and 17th century to a position where human beings can probably be seen essentially as the size of microbes on an earth, which is the size of a pebble in a large ocean which extends for thousands of miles. Human beings appear to be so totally insignificant in a universe that is so large that, again, it's probably impossible for our minds to frame an accurate image of it. Now, let's say there's a higher intelligence to us, other higher forms of life. And how would that form of life from above looking down at us, what would they see and hear as they observe humans on Earth? Well, they would hear this clatter of shrieking noise emanating from this little piece of sod flying through the universe, and see a race of humans divided into nations, religions, races, sexes, economic and social classes, not taking good care of the earth and pretty much at each other's throat. And I think today, a lot of people think, like fallen civilizations of the past, that we are the cream of the universe now, that we've reached the pinnacle of evolution. And we swell with pride as we look at our accomplishments and the civilization we have built. And I don't mean to make fun of it. We have built a great civilization, but we got a long way to go. And we look with pity at what our ancestors had to endure. Yet we protect ourselves against each other with nuclear weapons, which could destroy our little clump of earth. And we often try to deceive and subvert each other to gain an advantage. And nations in particular do that. We are at war with ourselves and others. A higher intelligence might think that this universe might be better off if this little clump of sod blew itself up and started all over again. And again, I'm being a little bit facetious with that, but I think there's an element of truth to it. But the good news is we are just beginning our journey, and we will one day realize we are the cream of the universe with an eternal life that proceeds toward greater and greater levels of grandeur. And again, one day I think we all will achieve cosmic consciousness, even if it's not going to be in this lifetime for most of us. So who are we really, and where are we headed? Again, we have a small and incomplete vision of ourselves, our world, and our future. We see only the tip of the iceberg of creation through our intellect and 5 physical senses. We don't yet fully understand that the human brain is evolving and bringing in a new faculty of mind, a higher sense beyond the human intellect that's going to show us a new view of ourselves and the universe, and that we have to live, think, and act in a different way than we are currently doing. If we're able to do that, it's going to be possible to achieve a heaven inside of ourselves and on the earth. It's a long way away, but I think becoming aware of the idea that we're evolving to this state, and if it could be proven, would be a huge first step. So spacecraft Earth is really a transport system to another dimension of mind where our view of the universe, ourselves, and our future destiny undergoes a drastic and very positive change. As we go deeper into our own mind, we begin to see the unity of ourselves with others and creation, and that we are all an extension of each other in one living, conscious, loving, intelligent being, and how each one of our actions affects every other thing in the universe. And we have to work together to achieve this next level of reality. So we are on a journey to the center of our being to find the intelligence behind the universe and why we are here and who we really are. And to me, this is the new frontier, and it lies inside of us. It's in our brain, body, and mind. And the most incredible thing is we can get in touch with this titanic intelligence, this omnipotent, omnipresent, omniscient power behind the universe to guide us on our journey. However, it's critical that we become aware of this, that we have this inside of us, this glorious splendor and intelligence, and then learn to connect to it in a deeper way, and how to do that in a safe way. So, I believe to deepen our connection to this greater intelligence, we need to develop the qualities of what we might think a higher intelligence represents. And to me, it's eternal virtues like being honest and truthful and loving and compassion and having wisdom, mercy, and loving our neighbor like ourselves. And we have to purify ourselves of our faults. I think self-purification is a big thing for getting connected to this inner guidance, and then develop a childlike mind. We have to be open-minded, willing, and humble. And the gifts that we're going to find in this inner universe and higher states of consciousness are unimaginable. And so I'm going to share with you some of the teeny little trinkets that I have found unexpectedly in my own life. Okay, I hope everyone got all that. I'm now going to shift direction a little bit and tell a little bit of my story, because I wanted to tell my story. It's in a book I wrote, Reaching Heaven on Earth, The Soul's Journey Home, where all the details are. I wanted to do a synopsis of my story because I'm kind of trying to show what I went through and how I've come to some of these understandings that I spoke about. And not that I understand all of them, but you know, I'm a regular person who was suddenly catapulted into a wondrous new world by a series of very unexpected events. It's a world that has brought me a greater meaning, deeper love, and a lot more happiness. And I found out the future is bright and can be trusted. And I can't say that I ever really believed that before, and now I do. So I grew up in Madison, Wisconsin, in the Midwestern US, in a village of 1,500 people called Maple Bluff. It was, to me, an idyllic place to grow up. It was like Mayberry from the Andy Griffith Show. We had a house on a lake. In the summer, we would swim and boat. In the winter, we'd ice skate, and I would freeze and want to get out of there. But there were 8 kids in our family, 6 sisters. I was number 6. My brother was number 5. And my dad was somebody who started in the mailroom and worked his way up to the CEO of Oscar Mayer and Company. He had a man of great integrity that struck fear in us kids and also most people. He was critical and moody. He had the nickname of General at his work, but he was also very generous, honest, and trustworthy. He was the patriarch. He provided the economic security. He was the ruler, God the Father, and a pillar of the community. Now, my mom was very kind and loving. She loved children. My father would always say that she cooked dinner every night for 30 years. She definitely played second fiddle to my dad, but I believe it was her love that really kept the family glued together, and which it could have disintegrated a lot of times. There was a lot of turmoil, but also a lot of just really fun and great things. But I always remember her playing Home Sweet Home on the piano in our house. So we were a big Catholic family. 10 of us would go to church on Sunday. My brother and my hair would be greased back with Brill cream. We looked like the perfect family. As I said, we weren't, but it was a great family. And we all loved to go to our grandparents' cottage on the Wapsipinicon River, and just outside Davenport, Iowa. And the joy of being with our aunts and uncles and cousins. We had a huge extended family. We'd all go out there in the summertime. We'd swim in the river, we'd fish. We'd chase fireflies and butterflies. We'd have picnics. We'd drink sodas, pick raspberries, play cards, horseshoes. That was heaven on earth. And the name of it was the Eagle's Nest. And as I was driving in here to Waynesboro, I see that the airport is named Eagle's Nest. So maybe that's a synchronicity there, a connection. I was a very shy and nice person. I was a people pleaser. I loved to play in my imagination. I wanted to be a future professional athlete, either a basketball player or a golfer. In the wintertime, I would shovel the snow off our driveway and play basketball games against myself, being the star player on both teams, of course. I was good at school, didn't like it, but I did like it for the sports and social part. I rarely raised my hand in class. I always got those report cards that said, I wish Scott would raise his hand more. You know, I was just very terrified, very shy. And I was always afraid if I got called on, my mind would go blank and I'd look like a fool. And I didn't ask, I had my first date in 9th grade and had actually my friend asked the girl out. And then he actually went on the date and waited outside as I went inside. And but I was good in sports and basketball and golf, and practicing these sports was an early form of meditation. And basketball allowed me to dance and create because I was tight and shy. So, however, I did have anxiety from an early age. Sometimes I felt like I was going to stop breathing, or sometimes my mind would race out of control. So finally at age 22, I went and saw a psychologist. I didn't want to go. I felt stained, felt like there was something wrong with me. And he gave me a prescription for a mild dose of Valium. And for whatever reason, there was something inside of me said, don't take them. You got to do this without drugs. Not that there's anything wrong with that. And I knew the path ahead wasn't easy, but I would say there are two things in my life that have probably been the best things that ever happened to me. One would be anxiety. And another thing would be that I went through a lot of trial and tribulations and a lot of things went wrong because, well, particularly the anxiety, it led me on an intense journey of personal and spiritual development. From age 22, I've been at it 42 years, and I never thought it would lead to the place where it has now, and I'll get into that later. But I went to the University of Wisconsin, and when I graduated, I wanted to leave the Midwest and my family behind for Southern California. I felt like I loved the Midwest, but its traditions and way of thinking and living and behaving, I wanted to, do something different. I thought freedom and a new and better way of life waited for me out in California. I wanted to make a great deal of money, and my goal was to do work that would be even more prestigious than my dad as CEO of a company. And so my goal was to climb the ladder to stardom, where I was sure I would find my security, my self-worth, freedom, and reason for being. And so now I'm going to fast forward 16 years up to a 3-year time period in 1996 to 1998. I was approaching 40 years, and I call them my descent into hell. And I was exiled to the desert. At that time, I had somewhat climbed the ladder of achievement, at least in my own mind. I had a BBA and MBA from UCLA. I'd been a certified public accountant, a chartered financial analyst, an accountant, an investment banker, a VP of corporate finance, and then an entrepreneur. I had started one summer working on the base floor of a meat packing company in the hog cut department. And as my business career progressed, I climbed to higher floors of achievement. That's kind of how I looked at it back then. Like the higher you were up in a building, that meant you were more successful. So when I started as an accountant, I was on floor 12. And I did a summer internship at Lehman Brothers in corporate finance in New York City, and I was on floor 44. And even floor 103 for 2 weeks that summer. It was in 1984. And I was in the World Trade Center, the North Tower. And the whole time I was there, I was afraid the building was going to fall down, which it did in 2001, unfortunately. Then I was at the Prudential Capital, where I started on the 27th floor, went to the 36th, and then I became an entrepreneur with a wealthy man who at that time was chairman of the board of the University of California Regents, and he was later an ambassador to France from the United States. And so I thought I had hit it the big time, and maybe I did, but I was looking for financial security. I still wasn't getting it. And then my financial fortunes reversed, and I dropped down to floor 13. And then suddenly I was in the elevator heading toward the basement really fast, and the life I had known and expected to live was fast crumbling. I had, all these credentials and accomplishments, but they were nothing against the downward force of this onrushing tsunami. And just like civilizations, the higher you rise, the faster you fall when you begin tumbling in the wrong direction. That's what was happening to me. And I think this can happen when a person or civilization is not following their ordained path in life, which I think it was true of myself at the time, which I was called to more of a spiritual life, I guess. And not that I was doing anything wrong following the other life, but also I think it's happening to the United States today. I think we're on the wrong path. So it was a very devastating time, but it's also what liberated me, because again, I had been on a deep spiritual path for 20 some years. So I kind of knew there was something deeper to all this. It forced me to let go of the material world and its intense hold on me. It took me into the depths of my being and diminished my ego and led me to a deeper closeness with my inner voice. So those are priceless, eternal things. So, but I ended, my marriage ended. I had to sell my house. I had to live in an apartment. I lost a longtime friend and business partner for a number of years. I lost my business income, my financial solvency. I kept getting sick. I got shingles, and it was just one thing after another. And it was some force was driving me to my knees to just surrender. And I wrote, I was a dying star burning out and collapsing under my own weight. Everything that said I was worth something had disappeared. So I always thought I was what I accomplished. So who was I if I wasn't these things, if I wasn't accomplishing anything? And that's what I had to find out. But again, deep down, I knew I was on a spiritual journey, and these failures and trials and tribulations were taking me off the path I was on. And it was directing me to a different one that would eventually provide greater meaning, security, happiness, and peace. At that time, I thought I was in hell. I was undergoing a holocaust of the soul. But it was the beginning, as God joked to me, of being sent to heaven. So there was some truth to that too. But heaven was a long way away still. So I had a new map for my life. I had to go within to find answers, listening to the still, quiet voice of God. And God, for me, is the intelligence behind the universe. And Walter Russell would call it the universe of knowing that I would have to access, which was, beyond the human intellect. And so the living light and treasure were inside of me, not outside where I had been looking. I was no longer on an outer path chasing wealth, prestige, and property. In a sense, God had to create a blank slate in me to allow room for new meanings, new ideas to arrive, and a new way of thinking, and then a much more direct connection with my inner voice and this universe of knowing. It was setting the stage for my second birth. And now, like St. John of the Cross, I was on a dark path in the night and really not sure where I was being led at that time. But again, I felt somewhat confident I was still on the right path, even though it was very shocking things that I had to go through. So then, amidst all of that, as the turbulence in my life was picking up, then a new and dramatic development happened, probably the last thing I needed, and it's something that changed my life forever. So one day I was meditating and praying, and I felt a bubbling sensation in my lower spine region. It felt and sounded like bubbles popping or Rice Krispies crackling. And I was like, what is going on here? And then I heard this snap, and this tremendous energy began to course through my body. It surged up into my head. My head was filled with all this luminous light. And it was like a powerful new force had become active. And my body's energy flow had instantaneously gone from like 0 watts that I didn't feel anything to 50,000 watts. I had become a live wire. And it seemed like my brain was working at a feverish pitch and was being fed by this more powerful energy. To this day, 24 years later, this powerful energy has never stopped flowing. Now, simultaneously, I felt an intense suction-like effect emanating from my reproductive area, extending all the way into my throat. And it was like a powerful vacuum cleaner was sucking something upward into my head. It was so forceful that I had to be very careful not to swallow my tongue. And I was feeling a lot of heat in my body from the energy, but I could also feel the flow of this soothing, whatever it was being sent upward. It felt like it was like a milk-like substance, and it seemed to be acting like a coolant or a nutrient to kind of cool my brain off, and also this heat from this energy. And my whole body felt like a chemical laboratory working at a feverish pitch. So at that time, I knew something profound was happening. It was different from anything I had ever experienced. I did not know it was a Kundalini awakening. And it would be 3 years before light was shed on what occurred. So for 3 years, I didn't know what this energy was, but surprisingly, it should have scared me more, but it didn't. And so then what started happening, right after this awakening, I started having psychic and paranormal experiences that I could only attribute to this energy, and synchronicities. I think a lot of people know what those are, and they just blew my mind. I felt like the universe was communicating to me in this whole different way. These things that were happening, and I'll give some examples, but they seem to be guiding me and preparing me for future changes in my consciousness. So just to give you some examples, and again, while all this was going on, I stayed very grounded. I did not get carried away or think, like these were all these amazing things, but it started out by having prophetic dreams. I would dream something and then it would happen a month later or 2 months later or a couple days later. And I think if that had happened once, I would have probably just thought, you know, it's just some weird occurrence, but it happened time and time again. There was one time I was in a certain place with a certain person in a certain location. And I actually had written the dream down in my journal, forgot about it, and a month later, that's where I was. And I gasped when I thought, oh my God, you know, this is beyond time and space. How do you explain this? And also I would know that certain things were going to happen, and then they did happen. I was almost like being able to prophesize things. And I had a lot of out-of-body experiences where my body would leave, or my awareness would leave my body. And then I would look down at my legs and it was like, hey, they're detached from me. They're not part of my body. And then one day I was standing in my backyard. I was looking at my house and I saw a wave just ripple through it. And it had lost its solidness. It was like just vibrating light waves. So all kinds of these, just all kinds of different experiences like this. I had a lot of spiritual visions. One time I was hiking in Hawaii, in Maui, and I saw Mother Mary's face fill the whole cliff. Another time Jesus was enclosed in a flame and jumped into my heart. Sometimes I found myself wandering back in my past, sometimes seeing into the future. About 10 years ago, I was looking down, and it was like I was just above the moon and I could see the surface just like I could see Michaela over there right now. It was so clear. And then it was 2 years ago when I was watching the movie Apollo 11, which came out, which was about the astronauts that went to the moon in 1969. There was a picture in that movie where it was the scene that I see all the time. Like I see it right now, this moon thing, it's like engraved in me. And it was the same thing, but I had seen it 10 years earlier. And so just a lot of things like that happened. I was in Richmond, Virginia one time and walking to the James River, and all of a sudden I found myself like back in Civil War time. And I know this might, for some people, sound very weird. And again, it didn't get me carried away at all, but I could feel the solemn and just the sorrow and anguish of the people. And that was after the destruction of the city of Richmond. And then finally, I was writing, I started writing mystical poetry. Actually, that started in 1991, but it picked up after the awakening, where I started writing all these. I wrote 48 mystical poems, and about a quarter of them, 12, describe different characteristics of the cosmic conscious state. And so, but I just looked at these experiences were telling me that there was greater potentials in my mind and brain that I realized. And again, I stayed grounded through it all. And so then from there, I survived the 3 years of dark night of the soul, and I just survived the Kundalini awakening, and the Kundalini energy was still going strong. And so then on Christmas Eve in 1999, the millennium was approaching, and I was in Florida visiting my ex-wife and my ex-mother-in-law, staying with them. And that night before we celebrated, I went to a bookstore, and I walked into the bookstore, and as what had happened all the time, it would be like, go in here, go to that section, and zip, pick out that book. And that had happened to me just a lot of times. And at that time, like maybe a lot of people on their own path, you know, you read book after book after book, and I picked it out. It was Living with Kundalini, the autobiography of Gopi Krishna. So Christmas Eve, 1999, he had his awakening on Christmas in 1934. But, and so I picked out the book, and I thought, Gopi Krishna, I'm not into Eastern anything, so that name doesn't resonate with me. And Kundalini definitely doesn't resonate with me, and I know it doesn't with a lot of people. But I read the back of the book. I started reading the book, and I was just glued to it. It was like, oh my God, you know. And I read the whole thing in about a week. And he had experienced an awakening of Kundalini, where this energy shot up his spine, and pretty soon his consciousness left his body, his physical body. He was detached from it. He was in this joy and ecstasy beyond, you know, you're able to even envision. And then he came back into his body, and for the next 12 years, he went through very difficult times, and eventually he stabilized, and he ended up writing 18 books, and he came up with this whole new theory of evolution, and he lived in this amazing world. And I read every one of his books probably 4 or 5 times. Every book to me was remarkable. And it represented a titanic shift in my life because he introduced me to the concept of higher states of consciousness. And I had heard that term, and sometimes it even annoyed me. Why is something higher than this or that? But he explained what it was, and I got it. And it provided me so much hope and inspiration. It gave me a more expanded vision of myself, of my purpose of life, and really humankind's destiny. He explained why the human race was having such difficult times, that we were violating evolutionary laws. Everything he wrote made sense to me. And he gave me a comprehensive explanation for all the things I was going through. A lot of the psychological and physiological experiences. He explained the mental and physical instability I went through. He explained psychic experiences, the new ability to write in verse, the expanded state of mind I was experiencing, the joy and ecstasy. He explained it all was a result of this process in the body from this energy, this more powerful energy. And he was offering explanations that neither psychology or religion or science or medical science or any other branch of knowledge were able to provide me. And I'm sure, like some of you, it was like I had so many different mentors, had read so many books, had studied so many different areas, always one thing after the other, but it almost all came to a head in him. Like he put it all together in a way nobody ever had. And so that weird sounding name to me and Kundalini and all that, it was like, oh, it's a weird name sounding to some people, but it explains, how we're evolving our consciousness to this next level. So, but I was, again, very intrigued by it because of the biology. I used to always write in the early 90s, divinity is within, but now it's divinity is within, and there's a biological connection to the divinity. And so that meant a lot to me, because being an analyst and all that in my future or past life, it was like, I like to see things proven or all of that. So, and just very quickly, and then we're going to take a break here in a minute or two, but Gopi Krishna again proposed that human evolution is planned, and that the human brain is in a process, still in a process of organic evolution. And under certain conditions, the process of Kundalini may accelerate this process of evolution. Now, sometimes people are born with this state of mind, so they don't even realize. I went through the whole process. I often wonder, Walter Russell, who's just a genius and just beyond comparison, I wonder if he was just kind of always that way, and I don't know enough about him, and I'm sure I can find out for the people here. But mine was a long, drawn-out process where I saw the biology and all these changes. So, and Gopi Krishna said that there was a predetermined objective to the next stage of human evolution, higher states of consciousness, and ultimately the cosmic conscious mind, which I will explain a little bit more near the end of this talk. He said it's the upgrading mechanism for the human brain. We often hear that we only use a small percentage of our brain. Well, how do we use a greater percentage? He said it was the process of Kundalini leading to these evolutionary changes. He said there's an independent existence to mind. It's a more subtle and intelligent energy, different from material energy. He said our brains act more like receivers, recorders, and transmitters of consciousness, rather than the atoms and the molecules and the physical components creating the consciousness. And I think Gopi's thinking on that was in line pretty much with Walter Russell. And he said, basically, we're a movie projector and the world is projected out from our minds. We don't live in the world lives in us. And as quantum physics tells us, there's not a world until we can view it. So there's not a world out there, and the world we see is subject to change as our brain evolves and we attain another dimension of mind. After I read his book, then I immediately went to the internet and I tried to find somebody that had worked with Gopi Krishna. I sent a letter to a man named Kiefer. Now, Gene is now 95 years old. He was a mentor, is still a mentor and a friend. And he had a close relationship with Gopi Krishna. He had edited some of his books. And Gene has been advancing the work and studying energy changes and Kundalini for over 50 years. He was from the Midwestern US, like myself. He was from Iowa. And so I wrote him the letter. He responded immediately. And he said, Scott, you've had a significant Kundalini awakening. I said, okay. And he said that the process of Kundalini can lead to glorious levels of inner happiness, bliss, peace, and moral purity. It can provide new talents, creativity, new knowledge, psychic paranormal experiences, even the genius mind. And then he said, if I continue to progress though, and he kind of said this mysteriously, he said, there's a much greater prize possible, and that's to experience the power and the beauty and wonder of the liberated human soul or consciousness. And at the same time, he cautioned that Kundalini could also cause physical or mental problems, and often does, if I wasn't in a healthy way, or there was some deficiency in my body or mind, or in my heredity, or the way I was living my life, if I wasn't living a healthy and balanced life. So he just warned me about that. But he basically said it was important to eat healthy, exercise, get lots of sleep, practice healthy spiritual disciplines, live life moderately and in balance. And he said, basically follow what all healthy religions, spiritual systems, ethical systems, the wise people through the ages have taught us. And Gopi Krishna once said, our slowly changing brain demands a simpler, nobler, pure life, and not a hectic one, which lands us into a beast of burden strife. And he would often give the example when he was alive, if you put a child in a chair and twirled them around endlessly, he said they wouldn't grow into a normal, healthy adult. He said it's the same for us in the frenetic way we are living our lives. So that was back in the late 70s and early 80s. And I think it's even worse now with how fast we're living life and how things are changing and all of that. Now, Walter Russell said, at all times, live your noblest. That is the way of harmony with the universe. Leo Russell said it was very important to develop the ability to love. Walter Russell said again about the natural law of balance giving for re-giving. And, if you look at nature, which has been a model for me, it serves us with air to breathe and sun to light the earth and warm us and water for us to drink, among other things. It's deliberate, it's calm, it does not rush around, but seems to get everything done. It occasionally gets mad and gives us things like tornadoes and hurricanes, but it, for the most part, doesn't panic or worry, doesn't work itself to death, does not use more than it needs, it shares, and it's not trying to corner the market on anything. So it really hit home to me that I needed to even make a greater effort to live a simpler, slower, and more noble life. And I've been trying to do that, sometimes failing a lot, but and I have been doing that for some 24 years. And I immediately in 1999 made God my employer. I had developed a new business, which I called Soul Quest, S-O-L Quest. And I said, essentially that's quest for soul, S-O-L, which is the light within. And it's also the quest for my individual soul to develop that, S-O-U-L, and I made it my soul, S-O-L-E, purpose in life. And so again, I made God my employer. I surrendered my work path and daily life to God. I said, in basically my inner voice, and take me wherever I am meant to go, and both in work and my life. And it was a scary thing to do because I didn't have income at that time, or really almost all my financial assets were gone, but I would work hard, serve and love and give and trust that I would receive back what I was meant to receive. I did hope that financial security was one of the things I would be re-given right away, but of course that did not happen. I found God was not an easy employer. The monetary pay was quite stingy. And I did always receive what I needed, even though I always thought I needed more. And but as I always say, he was quite liberal with his spiritual gifts, and those included more peace and serenity, and maybe a deeper connection to people, a deeper connection to life, and really some more joy and happiness. So I did my soul quest, worked in other projects. I would do anything I could to make money, to survive, and so that I was really almost, this was a full-time job, pursuing a spiritual path and higher states of consciousness. And I would walk my ex-wife's dogs when I lived in Washington, and She at the time worked for the president, directly for the president of the United States, and I was afraid that I wouldn't have food or be evicted from my apartment. And so the irony wasn't lost on me. Gradually, I shed almost all of my material possessions, or I think probably said more appropriately, they got shed for me. I didn't give them up easily. But for whatever reason, owning things felt really heavy on my soul. And I don't think there's anything wrong with owning a lot or any of that thing. It's just more how you use your energy. And if you use it, you can be very rich. But for me, it was like I shed everything. And there was a movie called Free Solo a couple years ago. I don't know if anybody has seen that out there on Zoom or in the audience here, but it was about a young man who climbed El Capitan, which is in Yosemite in California, and he did it without ropes, and it was a 3,200-foot sheer granite face. And I watched the movie, and the whole time my hands were sweating, like, how can he do that once? And he's dead, you know. But in a way, I felt like, I'm not making a comparison, but I was now kind of living my life without my usual ropes, and I was climbing my own spiritual mountain to a higher state of consciousness or a deeper spiritual path, and without my normal money security and income. And I was now being led by my inner voice instead of my intellect or self-will, and I was living a very changed and more simple lifestyle. And one of the things I realized is that I had to just keep deepening my connection to my inner voice, this glorious, splendid intelligence inside of me. And I believe we all have I call it a GPS system, which is a God pointing system. And I know for some people, sometimes the word God makes them mad. But again, for me, you know, everybody has their own definition. It's the intelligence behind the universe. I found through experience that there was this intelligence inside of me that could guide me. And so I think it's like important to realize that there is this resource inside of us, but it's also a developmental thing, at least it was for me, that to get more connected, I had to do a lot of work, a lot of inner work, a lot of spiritual practices. And over time, over a long period of time, the connection got deeper. And it was like, it was self-correcting in the sense, if I got off the path or made a mistake, I would be gently, or a lot of times roughly, guided back to the path. But over time, I got better at staying connected to this inner source. And I do believe we reward and we punish ourselves and create our own reality through the way we think and live our lives. So we're responsible, no doubt in my mind. And that the more deeply we get in touch with the power inside of us to guide us, the truer and straighter our paths can become, and the more our lives can unfold in a meaningful and a bountiful way. So I also found, again, that the outer world, you know, seemed to move at 78 RPMs, and I needed to really slow myself down to stay healthy with my Kundalini process, but also in harmony with God and nature, which seemed to move at that slower speed. And that's how I could hear God. I had to slow myself down. And I learned from Walter Russell about the idea of communing constantly with God. I do that throughout the day, where I ask for guidance on any step I'm about to take, or anything that I'm uncertain of, or just everything. And it was just a discipline of learning to do that. And it was my way of kind of praying unceasingly and practicing mindfulness. And I had to stay in the present moment. So like I said, I'm not going to go into all the details, but I did a ton of spiritual work. 23 years I've been in Al-Anon, a 12-step program. And anybody who's trying to achieve a higher state of consciousness, I can't even tell you how that program just saved my life and was the most incredible program I ever, you know, it was a living philosophy too. I spent 6 years doing spiritual direction work at the San Francisco Theological Seminary. A lot of this work was just to develop that deeper connection within. But I have come to believe that spiritual disciplines and moral development are as important as eating and breathing for healthy brain and mind development. And it's not something just that can be done as a luxury in spare time. And so, you know, our brain to grow up sane needs self-reform. I also found a daily practice was super important, you know, kind of like brushing our teeth and washing our hands. And so whatever that is, it can be, you know, prayer or meditation or purification work, 12-step work, intellectual work, yoga. You know, we all find our own path, but doing something daily and consistently Very important in keeping, again, not only mind, but brain sane. And I was really captured by the Russell's emphasis on love and in every thought and action and viewing everything in the universe through the eyes of love. And I'm more interested now in Leo Russell probably than Walter, because to me, she's just the paradigm of love. And I do believe that developing the ability to love and living a life of service and balance are the gateway to higher states of consciousness. And Walter Russell wrote, if love multiplies, civilization will survive and know everlasting peace. If hate and fear multiply, nothing can save it from perishing. No man or nation or world of nations can work against the law of love and survive. So just look at what's happening in the world today, and you can just see how we're heading down a very scary path. Now, Glenn Clark wrote a small book about Walter Russell called The Man Who Tapped the Secrets of the Universe. And then if anybody wants to get introduced to Walter Russell, that's a good starting book. It's a very short one, and it's an amazing book. And but Glenn Clark wrote, when your power to love becomes like God's power to love, then your power to create will become like God's power to create. Now that might sound a little ambitious, but I do think there's some truth to that, to at least try to approach that, trying to love more. And my own experiences is, I don't know if people have had this experience, but if you've ever, when you really first fell in love with somebody very deeply, did you notice how time and space and especially in the beginning, and over time it would melt away a little bit, but notice how time and space would disappear when you were with that lover. I also find that when I'm absorbed into my work, it's like I lose, hours go by in minutes and you're not aware of where you are. And that's a small glimpse, I think, of the more permanent love that's behind the universe, that's drawing the creation into unity, where there is no time and space. And so when I had those experiences, there wasn't a time and space, because time again went by in minutes, and space, I didn't know where it was. So now I'm almost done on part of my story, but I just want to mention, I moved to Washington, D.C. in 2002, and I'm not going to go through every year, but I just wanted to mention at that time, starting in 2002, I started having much more powerful inner experiences. And one of the points I've been trying to make is it's almost like on a continuum I've seen, where I had these psychic and paranormal experiences I talked about earlier, but they were nothing like these next set of experiences. So it's like the deeper I went on the path, my experiences inwardly got deeper. And these were much more stunning and enrapturing. And to me, they were glimpses of a more expanded consciousness. So I'm just going to give 3 examples. So right before I moved to Washington, D.C., I was driving down 3rd Street in San Rafael, California, stopped at a stoplight. I looked out the window, found myself drawn to look up at the sky, and I saw this fountain of continually expanding waves of joy interfused with a bright light. It was almost like heaven on earth. And I continued to see that in various places over the years. And then over time, I found that my inner being started becoming gradually filled with this ever increasing and never ceasing bubbling fountain of joy and bliss. And then another experience was in 2014. I was in the Washington, D.C. area. I was at a metro station waiting for a train, and it was at night. And I looked up in the sky, and off to the distance, suddenly the whole sky was filled with a sparkling, shimmering, vibrating radiance, lightness, and airiness, just completely beyond description. And it was that way for a fairly long period of time. And it was like I felt like I was seeing consciousness in its native form without the material alloy of this material world in it, or the image of it. So I know that might sound different to people, but it was an unbelievable experience. And all I kept thinking was, geez, this is really who we are. This is where we're really going. This is what our future is. Then the third experience was in 2018. I was driving from California through the vast open spaces of New Mexico, staring straight ahead as I was driving. And all of a sudden, again, there was this bubbling fountain of joy filling the sky. And what was different was all of a sudden like this Titanic-like consciousness. I don't know how else to explain it, but it was like seeing the full splendor of the radiant sun, and by comparison, my human awareness was like that of a feeble glow of a tiny firefly. And I just remember thinking, if I were to experience the full power and splendor of this, whatever it was, consciousness, it would crush me, or it would fry me like a piece of thread, just, or like a mosquito hitting a bug zapper. And it was the first time I got a sense of, how my little consciousness of awareness was so different than this titanic consciousness. So I saw these experiences. They were much more powerful and all-encompassing, and they foreshadowed an upcoming change in the volume and depth of my own consciousness. And I think it was the beginning of me beginning to see consciousness as the reality behind the universe. So what that means to me is like the material world was beginning to again become more like an image, almost like, let's say you're looking at a calm surface of a lake, and it's a sunny day, and yet you can see reflections of, say, trees and clouds on that calm surface. Well, in a sense, the water would be equivalent to consciousness, and then the images that I'm seeing, like the clouds and the trees, are really what the material world becomes. It becomes an image on this consciousness. And I don't know, that's how the only way I can figure out how to describe it. But I definitely saw these experiences were different characteristics of maybe what the cosmic conscious mind is, and that eventually they blend together in a more permanent fashion, and the cosmic conscious mind includes these things all permanently, and probably a lot more that I don't even realize. So again, I'm just trying to make the example of, there was a continuum of my experiences inwardly getting deeper, which mirrored a biological process that was going on at the same time. So, and then I'm just going to end my story portion of this with some really good news, for me at least. In the last 2 years, it's like the fruits of following this path I've been on for 24 years, where I surrendered everything to my inner voice, wherever it would lead me, came to fruition in certain ways. I mean, just the whole process, there's a deep meaning. So it's always the journey, but there were some things that happened that were really nice. So number one was, I had been trying to do a certain financial deal for 30 years in the date industry, which is date as in fruit. And the date always had a deep spiritual meaning to me, because the date tree was the tree of life in the Bible, and the Deglet Nor date was the date of light. For 30 years, I couldn't get a deal done. And the 24 years too, that when I had surrendered in 1998 to my inner voice, I made almost no money almost all those years. And I don't even know how I survived. I made enough to survive. But I was able to, now in July of last year, all of a sudden a financial deal came into me. I hadn't been in that area for a long time, but I knew I was meant to do it. I knew it would get done, even though everything else had failed for 24 years financially for me. And of course, right in the middle of it, of doing it, the pandemic came up, COVID, and I was like, oh my God, it's going to torpedo this thing. It didn't. My friend said to me, you probably have a 10,000 to 1 odds of ever getting that done. I said, no, this is going to get done. I just know it. I don't know why I know it, but I ended up helping a father and son sell their fairly large business, and I got paid a fee that was more than all the money I had made. The composite of the money I made in those last 24 years, the money I made this year for that deal, made up for all that. And the reason I'm bringing that up is that my inner voice always said, someday I will make you whole financially. And I doubted it the whole time. That money allowed me to pay back all my benefactors, all the people I had gone into debt to, which I was willing to do because I just believed in the path I was on, even though everybody kept telling me, get a job, do all those things. And I said, well, you may be right, but. And then 2 other things happened. I had been writing a book for 11 years, and I finished that in May of this year, again, Reaching Heaven on Earth, A Soul's Journey Home, which is my story, going into a lot more depth than what I'm speaking about today. And then also speaking here today. Since 2005, I speak about every 3 years. I don't particularly like speaking, but I always kind of update where my story's at. And I just felt like this year, one of the reasons I wanted to speak here is, well, not only because I admire Walter and Leo Russell, but I feel like I'm at a certain point in a certain closure point with my story, and then it's going to go off to a whole new level. And so, so I'm speaking here today. So the book and the speaking and the finances all came together. And what that really meant to me was that, I trusted this inner voice for 24 years, and it can be trusted. And I did find, though, that I had to let go of things a lot. I had to be willing to jump off the cliff, so to speak, where I didn't know if I'd be caught. But I can see now my life is 100 times richer than it was before in ways I would have never dreamed of. So, okay, that's the end of my story. Now I'm going to get to the kind of the last part, is a little bit more into this consciousness and what I'm permanently experiencing. So I'm going to share some hope, a lot more hope about our future and who we really are, and kind of the happy ending. And I'm going to just share some highlights of the consciousness I'm experiencing today and how it's different from the consciousness that I experienced for most of my life. The strangest thing is I feel like I live in two worlds at the same time today. And one is the normal physical world that we all experience and inhabit. And then just a hair's breadth away is this world of consciousness and intelligence. And there's a fine line separating these two realities. But again, over time, the boundary between them seems to be slowly melting away, with the physical world slowly becoming, or to exist or appear as an image in this world of consciousness, as I explained earlier. And so the onset of this new consciousness over the years has been very gradual, starting with the awakening in 1997, where I didn't have any of these things. But today I live in what I would characterize as a peaceful, a balmy, and a joyful inner state of being. I talked about bubbling fountains of joy filling my interior. It feels like I've awakened from a dream and landed in a soothing inner paradise of love, beauty, harmony. And the main thing is I realize this is who I really am. I mean, and I just kind of am still dreaming this world of the material world. And it is real. I don't mean that, but it's like I awaken to this whole other reality. And, occasionally I have this experience of melting waves of soft, beautiful rainbow-like colors gracing my view. And then other times the whole world just kind of whole world picture melts away in this indescribable blaze of light, glory, and radiance. And now when I look out upon the world, it appears more transparent, soft, and alluring and embracing, and definitely seems to be more a projection of my own consciousness. And the physical world seems to have lost its dimension, substance, and separateness. And I relate this to watching a movie in the theater, where, when you're watching a movie and you're very engrossed in it, and you see moving images on the screen, that to me, they seem to have dimension, separateness, and substance, but they're really only a projection of film images through a light onto a screen accompanied by sound. And that's the best way I can describe it, because it's if now I see myself as both my mind, which is projecting out a picture of life in the universe, but also simultaneously, I'm a physical being or actor in the play of life. The biggest difference now is that I see that my real self is my mind, or this drop of this radiant, joyous consciousness, which has a permanent existence, as opposed to thinking I'm a frail mortal body which will live and die. And that's helped me now. I've lost my fear of death totally. And very hard to describe these things, and I hope I don't lose people as I am, but I thought it was important to try to do my best, because these things have really happened to me, and they're really amazing things. And I feel like everyone has this potential. So my soul feels liberated, and now mixes with this sublime ocean. It's like when you see the genie leaving the bottle and see this vapor going out. Well, that's what I felt about my consciousness at first, when I would focus in, where it was like my awareness would just expand out of my body in these waves and waves of joy. And I never realized that, in a sense, my soul was buried in a tomb, the tomb of my body, waiting one day to be released by the power of Kundalini. And when I was younger, I was very claustrophobic, very afraid of being in crowds. And I began to think, maybe that's why I was claustrophobic, because it's just an amazing feeling to watch this expansion happen and the freedom that it feels that goes along with it. And so I've come to believe three things. This is something I wrote a little while ago. Number one, in our next destination in creation, our view of creation gets flipped on its head. The material universe loses its size and we become a titanic giant, a monarch, a king and queen, an eternal drop of glory in this infinite ocean of consciousness. We are no longer an inconsequential grain of sand in an unfathomably large material universe, which is what I described earlier when I started this talk about the size of the material universe. So we are no longer an inconsequential grain of sand in an unfathomably large material universe that could be blown away by a gust of wind like a speck of dust and never be missed. But we are a blazing eternal ray of a living, loving, conscious, eternal sun, which shines forever. So my story, which began with me as a young child filled with anxiety, now finds me arriving at a new world of light and delight, with the glee and wonder of a small child knowing a new treasure hunt has just begun, one that I know goes on forever, as I'm now exploring the mystery behind the mystery of the universe, consciousness. Second thing that I've come to believe is I come to believe expanded states of consciousness are the next goal for humanity. Their riches, an expanded awareness and magnificent state of being graced with new talents, greater creativity and perception of truth, new knowledge, genius, greater longevity, peace, joy, beauty, harmony, love, and knowledge of eternal life will greatly exceed the current prized treasures of human life, which I'm not diminishing at all. I think that, to have a good family and to be able to love and enjoy life are wonderful things. So just saying that there's another destination for us, I believe. And the thing that I think will happen from this is it's going to inspire people to live a more simple, moral, natural, loving, spiritual life and treating our neighbors like ourselves. So, so that new goal are, you have to do those things. You really do have to become those attributes. And so then finally, through my Kundalini process, it's become very clear to me that Kundalini is a physiological and psychological mental phenomenon in the body with a regular rhythm and process, say in a distant way like the process of pregnancy, but it's much more rare and subtle and harder to detect. But in this case, we give birth to a new consciousness instead of a new human baby. And then I think what the concept of Kundalini can do, I think it actually, even though there's a lot of resistance to this idea, maybe because of that term Kundalini, but it's really just the evolutionary mechanism. I think it'll enlarge science because it'll give science more levels of creation to explore, and also can they prove the biology of Kundalini? I think it enlarges religion, and that the basic tenets and ideals of religion will be seen as evolutionary requirements. I think it enlarges the creator because once we understand how vast this creation is, which is what I tried to paint in the beginning of the talk, and also what a wonderful future that this creation has planned for us. And finally, it enlarges the concept of who we are because we will begin to realize we're on a divine path to higher consciousness. And you don't even have to use the word divine. It's just the path to higher consciousness. And so Walter Russell talked about the Life Triumphant, and he said, it's that which places what a man gives to the world in creative expression far ahead of that which he takes from it of the creation of others. And he always talked about the need for us to become more of givers rather than takers. And that means giving to ourselves too. And we have to learn to love ourselves and accept ourselves and not judge ourselves if we're going to give that to others. But the Life Triumphant, here's what it's come to mean for me. It's being guided by my inner voice and staying in constant communion with it. It's living a life serving God, myself, and others. It's knowing I can co-create with God and can accomplish anything and can get through any difficulty with my inner voice's help. It's seeing my connection with others and seeing others as myself. It's giving love, it's receiving love, it's being kind, it's having loving relationship with others in all of life. It's knowing the foundation of the universe is love and is good. It's living a balanced life filled with peace and serenity, good health, adequate food and shelter. And it's living my life purpose, doing work I love, and using my gifts. So now I have two more things that I'm going to share. And I know this has been a long talk, but I think the next two things are really important. One is, this is Gopi Krishna's vision of the future. And I think to me, it's like a revelation. And here's how he described humanity's future. He said, the earth is to become an abode of a graceful, highly intelligent, cosmic conscious race, wafted to another dimension of mind as a result of organic changes in the brain. It will be equally cognizant of both worlds, the outer and the inner, or the material and the spiritual. It will be brought in touch with another level of creation, other intelligences, and states of being pervading the universe, a universe now completely shut out from our sight because of the limited capacity of our brains, therefore the need to evolve our brain further. It is not some aliens from other planets, but we who will be the future enlightened denizens of the earth, just as we have been of the savage past. The life of our distant progeny will be so full of charm and beauty, harmony and music, love and romance, adventure and exploit in space, both inner and outer space, wonders and marvels that no imaginative thinker has so far been able to frame a picture of it. And again, remember, our future progeny will probably include us. They will have such an extended span of life, long-lasting youth and vigor, freedom from illness, want, and oppression, that this will be the kingdom of God, paradise, or nirvana, prophesied by the great seers and prophets of the past. It is to be gained not in a hypothetical heaven, but here on earth in the organic frame of man. It is the sublime state of beatitude that is promised in every holy scripture of humankind. In this vision of the future, even the ideas of resurrection, liberation, and salvation will find fulfillment in a dramatic way. What we now, or at least some of us, experience or know of as clairvoyance, astral projection, telepathy, premonition, or prophecy are but faint glimpses of a future enormously extended state of consciousness. In rapport with the ocean of cosmic intelligence, man will know himself for what he really is, a drop in the everlasting ocean of being. He will be eternally serene and unaffected by the costumes he wore and the scenes in which he acted and all the aeonic drama since life started on this planet. I found that just very powerful, and knowing the profundity of Gopi Krishna, I know there's some truth to what he's saying, and I'm just going to end now with one of my 48 verses that I wrote over the 18-year time period, and it's called Cosmic Consciousness, and I'm just going to read parts of it. And again, I didn't write my verses. It was just this higher intelligence wrote them through me. I couldn't write one line of poetry. And all of a sudden, it was just, I was taking dictation. And again, I wrote 48. I didn't even realize that they were in my journal. And over this 18-year time period, I got them out. And they really, to me, they told a profound story. And they contain descriptions of our souls, of cosmic consciousness, Kundalini, and the light, love, and intelligence behind the universe. And they began with me. My first verse, I was 1991, flying from Washington, D.C. to San Francisco, and I was in the top bubble of a 747 plane, and all of a sudden I heard this voice say, start writing. And I didn't know what that voice was. I just started writing. So that was my first one, but I was always terrified of flying, so I was just terrified, but I wrote down, so I was in a place of much fear and uncertainty. And then the last one in 2009 found me in a place of much joy and peace, beauty, and happiness and love. So sit back, close your eyes, relax, and imagine yourself arriving in paradise, heaven on earth, and this is our future destiny. And I'll read this here. It is a celestial voyage of everlasting glory. We climb onto the ship, cast off to the unknown, sail through uncharted waters, endure dark trials, bounce on wavy seas, navigate through dark chasms. All of a sudden, when all hope is seemingly lost, we see a bright light. We sail toward the light. Darkness begins to fade, the shadows disappear, greater light begins to shine. Our hearts lift, our soul awakens, our flesh is stripped. The glorious dawn has arrived. The curtain is lifted. God's face shines through. It is now a brilliant light, a soothing medley of colors, a beauty impossible to describe. A lightness in the air, fountains of joy, pools of bliss. My soul expands, it becomes the light. The future is so bright, we have touched heaven here on earth. We clean away the mud and impurities and find our everlasting glory. Our souls fill the universe. God's grace descends into our hearts. We have arrived at the celestial port, a long voyage, a frightful night. In darkness we sat, in lightness we rise, ever thankful to God that we have embraced the living light, the only sure way to heaven while here on earth. And then ending with, we now see the truth. This is our future. This is who we really are. We have left the tabernacle of flesh to soar to regions of empyrean joy and unspeakable glory. Our souls are lifted up to heaven. The trumpets sound, the celestial angels sing. God's loving embrace sweetens every pore of our body. We have become pure spirit with some invisible link to flesh, roaming the celestial vault, drinking in the nectar of God, sailing with angels, floating on streams of light, emblazoned with hues of color, light as a feather. We have become the ocean, love's pure light. We float, we caress, we absorb, we dance. We have found heaven in our souls, here on earth, while alive in flesh. Earth's new Eden. So, thank you, everyone. I know that was long and it was a lot. I hope everyone enjoyed it.
And that is why I say that this course of lectures is to give everyone the knowledge of God's creative processes, the means he employs, the balance which he demands, the separateness of father-motherhood into fathers and mothers, which must interchange in balance in order to unite and as one. And that applies to every corpuscle of the body as well as it applies to every individual entity as a whole.